All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Into the Pages. This week we're going to be going through chapters 13 through 18. Beautiful chapters. So last week when we left off, a Viking ship. 3 Viking ships had appeared. Strange things could happen. What's his name? Elstan was very frightened by all of these Vikings appearing. But of course, John and ourselves were kind of like, whatever. Because we don't know who these Vikings are yet.
Yeah, not yet.
But we get to know them. Post-haste! Oh, we learned that they call these Vikings hordemen. Hordemen. They're a horde of men. I wonder if that was done on purpose. Because it totally sounds like they're just saying, a horde of men.
Horde of men. One thing I thought was kind of cool about, so John mentions this when he's observing them. He said that they look like Vikings and they have like the Viking-like ships, but they're like really clean and well kept. And they have like their hair's all brushed and nice, and their beards are all nice.
Yeah, that was funny.
Expecting them to be like, I guess how we picture Vikings. I don't know much about Vikings, but like just
I don't
like
either.
a ragtag group of guys who only care about murdering. It seems like they do care about that a lot, but I guess they're just.
But they for some reason
looking good.
They have really high standards for their looks and appearances.
Yeah. And also another cool thing that we learned in this first chapter, I guess, is how raids and battles are done. Like there is like the typical, I guess, like fighters against fighters, or I guess in this case, raiders against farmers. I guess I don't know, but
it seems like you hate farmers. Like
the rune stones that each village have plays a key part. Because the rune stones bind land wights, and land wights that are bound to that rune stone just kind of serve the people that are in that area, and they like protect them and help them do things. So when raiders come, they bring their own scops. So people like Sefawynn, who I guess loosen the land wights that are there. So like, and it's like an actual strategy. So if you're like attacking a town or something, you go after their lands wights as well as their people. Because Elstan's even saying he's like that they hunger for rune stones. Like, so I guess they're like searching for them or grabbing them for some reason, and that's what they're after. And it seems like without those rune stones, like they rely on them for a lot of things. And Elstan even says our rune stone still works mostly. Like, I guess.
Yeah,
like
they made it sound like they're starting to fail everywhere.
Yeah, because I guess back in the days, we get like a little story where Sefawynn kind of, I guess it's a child's story, but since Dawn has never heard it, and we obviously have never heard it, talks a little bit about their gods and their past of their gods, and basically you had Woden, and you had his wife, I forget what her name is, and she dies in a battle, and she's killed by this bear dude. It's not really clear what exactly is going on with him, but somehow this bear guy used writing to do something, and he kills the lady. And so Woden like forbids writing, and he's like really strict about it. And I think us as the readers and John's kind of like, oh, okay, that's just like a folklore, like they believe it, but it's not actually true. But these chapters kind of make us stop and think, like maybe
they make us question for sure
what
is really true.
Maybe it is true, because John's a little arrogant, maybe a little ignorant or naive, I guess would be more like, and he's really confident that because like he seems to, I wonder if it's part of his memory loss, but he seems to forget that he's in a different dimension, and so things could be different. He keeps making the assumptions that this is pretty much Earth, just a little different.
Yeah, even though we've read quite a bit in the like frequently asked questions parts of the book he has from the Frugal Wizard Incorporation, that it's not going to be exactly Earth. There's going to be some differences, but yeah, he does forget that a lot. whatever.
There's like been all these like hints where like you leave out berries and they suddenly disappear and something's made, or all these weird things. And in these chapters, there's a few more interesting things that happen. A little bit of lore there, I guess a little background in this world, which is pretty cool. I always like when the authors do stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know what it is, but I feel like a history buff when it comes to these fantasy worlds. Like I could probably get into a good book about like our history and of different historical events throughout the world, but I really get into it when it's like about a book's history. So I definitely love getting these little backstories too about anyone and everything.
For sure. I think it's a pretty common thing to do, like have this thing like, oh, this crazy stuff happened in the past.
Yeah. Seems like that's a pretty famous, popular way to go about it. Like it's like, oh, this thing happened 300 years ago. And then now it's like people living after it who are having to deal with the next bout of whatever.
Yeah. And with the news, so they're still pretty close to Aelsten's village. And so it seems pretty obvious that these Hordemen, Viking people, are going to raid. And so Aelsten, of course, being the leader of the village, wants to go back and help. But Sefawynn's kind of like, I can't do anything against these people. And even Aelsten says, there's 70 of these people. We don't have enough men to fight these guys. So
yeah, I mean,
he pretty much resigns himself to death. He's like, I'm going to go and fight with my people, or all the men are going to die, and all the, I guess, women and children are going to be taken as slaves. And so he like kind of resigns himself to that, and you're like, geez Louise.
Yeah, seriously.
And that sparks that compassion within John, I guess, and he decides that he wants to try to help. And he's going to try to help by doing what he's done, I guess, against Aelsten. He's going to use his augments, and he's going to use his artistic ability to try to deceive these people. With John's plan to help involves him using his augments and a little bit of his art. So he uses his augments at first, which is actually super handy. So he's able to zoom in with his eyes enough to get a good look at the captains of each of the three ships.
Yes, and we learn he can even take pictures.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck? Holy cow. I want to know where those pictures are stored. Right. Is it stored in his brain so he can just look up a photo like that? Or does Nanites have some sort of storage?
I don't even know. But
whatever it is, it's awesome.
That's some pretty intense tech.
Yeah. It's getting more high tech by the friggin' page.
And John's making some observations about himself as he's preparing to confront these Hordemen. He realizes he's like super terrified and nervous. And he's all like, I shouldn't be nervous because I'm a cop who infiltrated cartels. So it's kind of like So he thinks like, so he's going to rely, he's like, I don't remember being in any dangerous situations or being in any combat, but I think that my instincts will kick in if I get in a situation. So he's just going in totally blind. Like,
yeah, he's just kind of hoping.
Yeah, he knows he's a cop, and he's assuming for some reason that he has combat capabilities. So John, he takes these images of the captains, he draws their pictures on pieces of paper, and Sefawynn also adds to the plan to make it seem like John has captured her and made her his slave to kind of sell that he's an Aelf, or however you pronounce that word. An Aelf, I'm not really sure.
We need to look it up or something.
Yeah. And that takes us to chapter 14, where they enact the plan. And I think it's completely ridiculous what John says. It's like,
it's making me, this is just, I can see a lot of Tress in this.
So they go up to the Hordemen, and they're a little surprised because John assumes they're surprised that people are walking up to them calmly rather than being afraid or running away or fighting them, I guess. But he runs up, and I'm just going to quote this first one. He says quite a few out there, but he says, Alakazam, Bios, Discography, Philadelphia a la disco, nitrogen, i.e. polyester, Garfunkel, and Garfield. And so he just like says all these nonsense words. But I guess since they don't know what any of those things are, it's going to sound like he's speaking some language. And then Sefawynn translates, quote unquote, what he's saying, and basically demands to know what the Hordemen are doing. And they're kind of like, isn't it obvious? Like, everyone here knows what we are.
And once he made his babblingness, that's he kind of just he shouted at just whatever random people around him, but he soon got the attention of the 3 captains of each of the ships, and they came running over. I mean, not running, but they came over.
And basically, John says, "These people are mine. They amuse me, and you need to leave." And then I guess the main captain says, basically, like, "We're not afraid of you. Like, you think that you're." And I guess there are people the Hordemen call elves Alfir. So he's like, "You're not an Alfir," or whatever. I guess that's sort of a word for elf. And so John gets all mad. And he's like, "I have stolen your soul."
Yeah.
And then he whips out the picture that has his picture in there. So, and then he does the same thing for the other captains. And then he's like, "Tell me what your parents' names are." And everyone's like, "No, that's too cruel." He's like, "Silent slave." So they're just putting on this, and he's like, "Silent slave, we're all Nintendo you." What the heck?
I don't even know what that means, but it's gonna beat her up in Nintendo or something.
So the pictures do have like an effect on the Vikings. Like they're a little wary. One of the captains even draws his sword and says he wants to destroy the picture to free his soul. But the main captain says, "I've seen people from other lands who can do this, and they can draw and do art." So he knows what art is, and he essentially says that's what this is, and he's not going to be afraid of you. And so then they're getting a little more bold. They're getting a little more wise to his antics, and so he ups the ante, if you will. And John uses one of his. Oh, well, before this, they learn that the Hordemen have another captive. That's just kind of in the background for now, but they have someone else that's captive.
Yeah, they noticed him sitting there, all tied up.
Yeah, so they're like the Hordemen are getting a little frisky. They're like, "Oh, let's just keep these people. Let's kill the guys and let's take the Scald." Talking about Sefawynn. And so John uses another one of his augments, which is he can change his voice, and he can change it to sound exactly like the main captain's voice.
Yeah, which was a pretty good trick in this part.
And also, at the same time that he starts talking in his voice, he pulls back his sleeves and makes his hands and arms make it look like there's blood running down, turning them red. And that was like, holy crap!
Yeah, they were much more impressed by it than Sefawynn was.
Yeah, but even at this point, Sefawynn seemed impressed at least by the voice trick.
That's true.
And then he adds a reverb to it, which those of you who have the audiobook, I've never seen this in an audiobook. That's not like a entertainment thing. What's it called? I almost called it, but they did it with The Hobbit, where it's like a whole cast of people reading stuff and they add sounds.
I don't remember what they call those either, actually.
Yeah, something like that. But anyway, I've never seen that done in like a normal audiobook, but they actually changed Michael Kramer's voice to sound like it's like a little more robotic.
Yeah.
While he's talking in these lines where he's like, "I am Runian von Internet of Cascadia, Isle Prince and Keeper of Souls."
Yeah. And so at this point, it was actually what has kind of happened is the Vikings backed down, and he was able to convince them that he was going to steal their souls unless they left.
Yeah.
But then after they kind of were like, "You're not really going to do anything," or whatever, he was like, "Well, no, it's punishment. We're not only going to cast you out, but we're taking your prisoner as well."
Yeah.
So he walked onto the ship and is headed towards the guy who's all tied up.
Yes. But apparently in this world, Isles, whatever the heck they are weak over water. And so the captain did this as a trick. So he does believe that he's an elf, but he believes that he can best him over the water. So he attacks.
Yes, and he has his own... there's so many different terms. I always forget what they were. they have their own people. Oh, the Scald. That's what it is. I just found it. They've got their own Scald, which is different. What do they call them? What do they call Sefawynn? A scoff? Not only do they have like a lot of weird new phrases, they're like weird. They're just weird.
Moving on. So when the captain is attacking John has several reactions. First, he went into this assuming that he would have some sort of battle or combat instincts, which he does not. When he sees the axe coming, he gets very frightened, and he cringes, and he hears shouting people from deep within his memory. There's like angry voices, flashes of light, and he's like, "Have I fought in a war?" But I don't think he has. I think something else happened, because then he feels the overwhelming shame again that he felt earlier in the story, and it just makes him raise his hands, and he's super scared, and it seems like something's going to happen because his head and his chest augments don't work, and so I think he tries to bring his arm up, and he falls back, and the captain kind of follows him with his axe. But then I think this is going back to what I mentioned earlier, that the rune stones and the land's white can have an effect on combat. Is all of a sudden the captain's axe head just like falls off and like swings out into the ocean, and then he still has the handle, and he's still swinging, so he like narrowly misses John's face with the handle. The axe head goes flying into the ocean.
Yeah. So I can't. That wasn't John who did that, was it?
No, I think it was his land white. That's bound to him for some reason instead of a runestone. But if you think about it, that'd be super handy. Like if you have that in your village, and they can help you fight and by disabling your enemy's weapons and stuff. So it's pretty cool. But so the captain is still undeterred. He's like, I know. Like, and the captain. So first John tries to act again. He's like, how dare you? Don't you know who I am?
Yeah.
And the captain's like, yes, I know who you are. You're a prince of the elves, and the Dolkalafar will pay well for your corpse. And he says, you're weakened enough to fall to mortal blades because he's over water. And so he just wants to kill John and sell his body to whoever the Dolkalafar are.
I'm curious if that's a person or like a people. It sounds like a people.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like a people. But
they must be the enemies of the elves or something.
Yeah. But then Sefawynn kind of steps in, so instead of killing, she shouts out like, don't let them bind you. And then he's like, yes, don't bind me. They wouldn't dare. And then he said, my father would be outraged by the bounty price. And that persuades the captain to have his Scald come up and try to bind him.
Yeah.
Which, of course, won't work.
Yeah. This was... I just immediately thought it was like, okay, when Sefawynn tried to do her little poem weirdness with him, nothing happened. So it's like, there's no way this would work, right?
Yeah.
And of course, it doesn't work.
Doesn't do anything.
Which is good, because they're all like, oh my gosh, he's so... Well, I don't think... Maybe they weren't that surprised, but they were still like, you may have been able to get through those bindings, but you're still mortal, or whatever they said. He played it up a little more like, that's your best binding?
Yeah. And all this is done when he still has a reverberating voice in the audiobook. And so all of this is done with that reverberating voice. And finally, when he's able to shrug this off, the captain's finally intimidated and a little more wary, especially because Elston... So when the captain attacked John... Other Vikings attacked Elston, and Elston beat them, essentially. So now they're stuck on the ship. They have they're standing by the captive, but all the I keep saying Vikings, all the Holdermen are on the other side of the ship, and they're kind of blocking the way out, and it seems like they're willing to fight and not just let them go. So John comes up with another crappy plan. But he tells them to jump over the side, and he'll stall, essentially, to keep the people from coming. And so he uses ink that Sefawynn had made earlier, and when Sefawynn, Elston, and the captive, who we don't know yet, jump over the side, John draws a rune that he says looked like an F, and he's remembered seeing it on the rune stone at the village. And when he drew it, he says, like, you'll leave and you'll get out of here. And then there's like a loud thunderclap, and then the ink catches on fire, just
spontaneously combusted.
So I'm like, okay, John.
It sounded
you're
like
convinced now?
it combusted pretty violently too, especially since it was like some sort of like thunder, and suddenly it was all on fire.
We even get some art at this next point where you see Sefawynn and John in the water, and behind them is just a ship completely engulfed in flames. Yeah, and it even says so that after that he jumps overboard and the hold them and leave, and they leave that ship behind, and it's just burning down.
I like John's pose in that light. What?
Yeah.
But this is funny to me. We learned a few more things about his augments in this. First of all, for some reason, he starts to drown and has to be saved by Sefawynn.
Yeah, and they're only in 5 feet of water.
Yeah, only in 5 feet of water. But while he's drowning, more of his like menu stuff comes up, or he gets a warning. It's like
you appear to be.
Yeah, you appear to be drowning. You have 5 hours of oxygen left. Like, what? You can breathe underwater. You hold your breath for 5 hours. What the? Jeez, these augments seem to be unending when it comes to all the things they can do.
And
so
it even says, like, do you want us to contact emergency services?
Yeah, like, yeah. This kind of makes me think, going back to we were talking earlier, how hard it would be to, like, say, no, I don't want augments for my kid. Because, like, can you imagine how many kids drown every year because they have a pool in their backyard and they just are waddling around and then fall in and just can't get out, and it takes 3 hours for him to notice where the child went. Imagine if that kid had these augments that could breathe
Nanites.
or hold their breath for 5 hours. And also imagine if it could be like, you could just have a setting like, okay, this is a child. It probably won't know when to call for help. So just have a setting there that says like, okay, if it looks like the kid is drowning, call the parents, call the police, whatever. Get them help. They won't even have to hold their breath for 5 minutes before people are like, oh my God.
Oh, seriously. That's actually, I didn't even think about that. But yeah, that'd be super nice.
Kind of just came to me. I don't even have kids. How did you know?
I have 4 and they're all terrible. Just kidding.
You only can say 3 of them are.
And that takes us to the end of the chapter.
Yes.
And then we get another piece of art that I think is really cool. It's like this epic fortress with like a futuristic looking army with like robot giants and like a helicopter and like
got this
skull
insanely,
with a cannon in it.
It looks like this huge, massive castle that they've installed cannons on. I was actually really confused why we were getting this art because they show us this before they talk about it, but
yeah. And then we get this. Actually, I think this is the longest excerpt from a Frugal Wizard's Guide to Surviving Medieval England.
Talking about the packages and crap.
So I don't know if we want to talk about everything, but basically it goes over the different packages that you could get. There's like everything from like luxury to discount. The luxuries are like you can just really customize it. Like you can make it so that you're in this huge castle with trained servants that will do everything you want. Down to like a super discounted one where they don't really know what it is, and you can just kind of go and see what happens. Yeah. Or you can like go when there's a plague, which we've already talked about a lot of these, but
I thought it was interesting how it mentioned at the beginning of this, the whatever section you want to call it, our fantastic packages. But I thought it was interesting that it talked about they provide the highest quality experience at a fraction of the prices charged by other dimensional tourism companies. So we kind of thought that maybe being in the business world, kind of like ours, how there's never just one company that does one thing.
It makes sense that there would be like all these competitors.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially
so I just thought that was cool to confirm that. I kind of thought that like these people, the Frugal Wizard company, it doesn't have a monopoly on this or whatever. It just makes me curious how the competition works. I guess
I don't know. I would be curious to know that too. But one thing that stood out to me, I don't know if it was in this excerpt or in a different one in these chapters, but there was one part where it said, "We're the only company who hasn't been accused of breaking interdimensional rules." And then there's like a disclaimer, and the disclaimer is, "We haven't been accused in Canada."
In Canada.
So I'm guessing, okay, so in Europe and America,
like United States,
and everywhere else you've been accused,
China,
and it seems like they're super shady. Their basic thing is once you get into your dimension, you can do whatever the heck you want. Like they said, they'll even sell you illegal weapons. Like they said that in order to get around the laws of being an arms dealer, they'll meet you on international waters, and you can take all the weapons with you to your place. Like you can have a helicopter, you can have advanced weaponry for soldiers.
And that's kind of where that art comes in. That's because like that person had a super advanced castle and a helicopter, and at least it looked like a partial robot army with maybe like men just having armored suits of some sort. But
So it seems super shady. Like they'll just let you go into this dimension, this world, and just be worse than Hitler could even imagine.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, you could freaking go back in time and be Hitler, except with you'd have weaponry that was so far advanced than anyone else that you probably would just trounce on anyone who tried to stop
even
you.
If you just went with
Hitler.
our technology, like imagine if you could go with modern American military technology and tech, and go to medieval England. Like it wouldn't even be anything, a competition or anything. You could do whatever the heck you wanted.
Seriously.
Which is why I think this cartel drug lord is such attracted to this place. It's because he can do whatever the heck he wants. He can be a crime boss, be a lord, and no one can even hope to stop him.
Yeah, honestly.
And I'm kind of jumping around the excerpts at this point. But another interesting thing they said is, since there's like an infinite number of dimensions and split-offs from our own, they say when they're picking them, it's kind of like random. And then they say it's very unlikely to be able to find the same one again. So the only way in and out of a dimension is with a beacon. And when you purchase it, depending on which package you purchase, like you can do add-ons and stuff, but the beacon is yours. Like if your beacon's turned off or anything, like they can't find you, they can't come and get you. And so it seems like literally once you're in there, there's just no accountability.
It definitely seems that way, because there really wouldn't be. If they can't find you, law enforcement can't find you. And it doesn't sound like they monitor the world.
I don't think they do, because like they even say like you can turn off your beacon if you want, and there's like that makes it literally like impossible. Yeah. Like you're still there, and they could technically try to find you again, but it's like they said it's trying to find. The way that they said how hard it is to find is they say it's like you grabbed one grain of sand.
They were saying the sand is easier, but go on.
Oh yeah, the sand is. So they're saying this is easier than refining the dimension. So you grab a grain of sand and you drop it on a beach, and then come back 10 years later and try to find that exact specific one again. Like
that's easier than finding the dimension.
Yeah,
so it probably literally is. I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure there would be a lot of people who. I imagine like all the protesters we get for wars and stuff. Like imagine all the protesters who are probably like finding out people go to dimensions and just become like horrible people.
Yeah.
Something that probably. And I wonder if there is anything like going against that. People are like, you shouldn't do this because just because they're in a different dimension doesn't mean they're still not people or whatever.
I would hope so. It seems like there's,
because that kind of like this company makes it sound like they don't care.
No,
even if they cared, they probably couldn't do anything. Once they sold you to the dimension, you can just and disappear into whatever this is, the cosmos, the dimensions. I don't know what this looks like.
I wonder if they don't view them as fully people, because they're mentioning that the dimensions they go to are not as solid as our dimension. So like you can bring whatever you want to these other dimensions, but you can't take anything out. Like it'll fade and like disappear. They did say that they don't allow anyone who has a criminal or who's a wanted criminal to go in, but
so they kind of try.
But obviously, unless this Ulrich guy.
Yeah, how many criminals out there are criminals who have not been like charged with anything, or they've escaped justice or whatever, and they could just do whatever they do to get new ideas or whatever, so that you can't see their past or something. I wonder how hard they try to make sure that you're not like some.
And it honestly seems like when all these like marketing things we read about this, it just seems like they're catered to criminals and to psychopaths.
Yeah, kind of.
Because like, I swear, almost every time it's like, do whatever you want. You can do this. Do whatever you want. Like, we don't care. Just pay us money, and then you can do it.
I still want to know how much it costs to buy this dimension.
I know. I want to know too.
Because it sounds like it's expensive enough where like maybe regular Joe Blow cops can't afford it, but not so expensive that only the mega rich can afford it.
Yeah, who knows?
Some of it's like $20,000, $4 million. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Maybe we'll know one day.
Yeah, so that gets us to the next chapter, chapter 15.
Yeah, this was what I was talking about. I jumped without even realizing it, but we hear about or reading about John almost drowning, and his warning. He even tells that he does not need help. And I love how it's Sefawynn who was like, how did you almost drown in a mere 5 feet of water?
And then Ellison's like, because he's an elf, they suck in water.
Yeah.
But Sefawynn knows he's not an elf, so he's like, he's this incompetent weirdo.
And at this point, I'm kind of surprised, but the Vikings see him almost like drown, and they just kind of like It was weird, and they keep leaving.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like expected. Like they have the same opinion as Ailsing. They're like, their plan was to get him over water so they could overpower him, and so seeing him almost drown, I guess they're kind of like,
yeah, but I guess
more like further evidence rather than like.
I guess they're traumatized enough from what happened, from like his axe getting knocked off, the boats not doing anything to him, and then he just writes an F on their ship, and now it's sinking in the explosion of fire. So I wonder, and this actually reminds me, the chief, the main one, I guess, like the same one you were talking about, was like, fine, we'll leave, but we're only staying away long enough until we get enough force to come back and defeat you. So
yeah, until we get strong enough.
I'm curious if we'll see these guys come back later in the book.
I don't know.
I don't know either,
because we're like we're almost halfway through the book.
Yeah, so it kind of seems
I don't see it going long enough for them to like come back. Maybe they will, but
if there was like a continuation of the series for sure, but
yeah.
I don't think we'll see them again unless the story takes a radical change and becomes seriously fast paced.
Yeah. And this is when we get introduced to the captive. His name is Yazad. So Yazid, we find out, is, I think he's like some sort of Muslim or something like that, because he mentions that he's in this because they are Sefawynn, I think, or maybe Elston asks, like, why are you here? Like, why aren't you with your people? And then he explains that he's
because they know where he's from. Like, he has that look like, oh yeah, I know. He looks like he's from such and such place in the world.
Yeah,
so
like
I think
John.
That's why that question.
John puts him as Middle East, and even says he has like a Middle Eastern accent. Yeah. So
definitely sounds
Muslim to me.
A Muslim type.
Yeah. He says that he's there as a missionary to convert people to the one God, one true God. So I'm like, okay, that kind of makes me think Christian. And then he starts talking about his religion a little bit, and then John kind of pops up and he's like, you mean like Jerusalem and Christ and all that? And he's like, oh, you're talking about the Yeshuas or something like that.
Yeah, the other.
And then they're like close cousins of ours. So I'm like, okay, yeah, definitely like Muslim or something. Which is also bad. So that's kind of how he got captured. Is he likes to sail because apparently there's no ocean out there, and he was sailing around just having a good time.
He gets into this a little more in the next chapter, but do go on.
But yeah, so that's why. He was sailing. They
and then
came across him.
He tried to preach to him.
Yeah, he tried to preach to him. And apparently they don't kill holy men for some reason.
But he probably was definitely heading toward a not so nice of a life if he hadn't been saved. I'm sure they don't kill him, but he's not put into some like hard labor, slavery type of thing.
Who knows?
Maybe he's going to go the way of the Jews and just get put into slavery and treated terribly.
Yeah. And so this is all the conversation that's kind of happening. Well, most of it. Some of it's coming from the next chapter, but they're walking back from the shore back to their little camp area that they had. And when they get there, it's like a pretty cool. I thought it was cool. At least everyone else besides John was pretty freaked out by it. But there was essentially a message written. I can't find it now.
Nice work. You might be worth the trouble.
Yeah.
Burning letters.
I see that message, and it's in English, so John can understand it and he can read it, but the other people can't. That doesn't look familiar to them. So I think that's another cool hint that maybe the Landswight knows that John isn't, not only that John isn't from this land. I don't know if they know he's not from this world, but no, he's not from this land, and they know what language he speaks and how to write so he can understand it. And then he says, oh, so is this like the same fire that burned the ship? And they're like, no, this is Logna's fire. So it kind of seems like Loki. So Thor burned the ship. Loki wrote the message saying he'd be useful. So it seems like, okay, there's something afoot. A game is afoot.
Maybe Loki's the good one in this, and Thor is the one you got to watch out for.
Yeah, who knows? And so everyone's kind of anxious, like Elston and Sefawynn. So they convinced John to kind of scuff it out and make it go away. And it's also decided that everyone's really tired and they need a safe place to sleep. And so Yazad, or however you say his name, Yazad, I think.
Yazad looks right.
Says, I have a preserve nearby that we can, well, not nearly nearby, it's a 3-hour walk.
Must not have been that late.
Relatively nearby that we can rest at. And they all decide to go there and then continue to save Wiryn later, I guess the next day. And it turns out that I guess it's kind of almost the preserve that they go to. This is we're now in chapter 16. The preserve to me kind of had the feeling like a missionary convent type thing, or what's that called, where monks or missionaries or nuns are.
I am honestly so unfamiliar with religion stuff.
Yeah, I think it's like a convent or something like that. Missionary house, I don't know. That's there, and so there's like other people there, and they were worried about Yazad because he'd been gone for a while, and now he's there, so everyone's relieved.
Yeah, they ran into one guy. There was some guy still up. I don't know if he was keeping guard or something, but he was the one who kind of like, oh, Yazad, we were so worried.
Yeah. You also get a little more insight into this figure called the Black Bear, which I don't know. We didn't really talk about it a lot, but the lore of this world is that there was a war between the Black Bear men and the gods, and the Black Bear had the ability to kill gods, and he kills Woden's wife, which is part of the reason why they forbid writing. But the Black Bear was bound before Woden's wife died. She was able to bind the Black Bear into this certain area, but he's like constantly fighting against it. And apparently, the way he does that is with woods. I don't know, but I don't know what chapter this is in. It's later on, but Sefawynn's explaining that there used to be a town there, but it was taken over by the Black Bear, and you can kind of see it through the forest. So it's like, I guess, right. When the Black Bear takes over something, he turns it into forests, and everyone there's like scared of the forest. Like, they won't really look at it. They don't want to get near it. And Elston's even a little uncomfortable that their preserve is so close to the forest.
Yeah. They all seem to be worried about it, except for the people who put that preserve there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yazid and his people don't seem to mind it so much.
I think it's Yazad.
It's only because I say Sazid and I'm like, Yazid. I thought it was interesting in the little excerpt before this chapter talks about moving stuff between your dimension and the dimension you bought, which apparently you can't take stuff back from the dimension you buy. Yeah. It just like disappears. I thought it was gonna be like some sort of rule thing, like, oh, you're not allowed to do that because of whatever problems might cause, but for some reason it's physically impossible. And they give an explanation. It was kind of just like, okay, if you say so.
Yeah.
But you can bring stuff from your dimension to theirs, so that's how you can get all the advanced weaponry and all that jazz if you wanted.
Yeah. It's very true.
But I thought that was interesting to learn about that, because I was kind of thinking like maybe one of the reasons people would want to buy a dimension is because you go and mine all the gold and just be a trillionaire because you've got an entire world's worth of gold to yourself or something. I don't know, but that's what I thought.
Yeah, but you can't, because they'll fade away.
Too bad for them.
So everyone, they get there and it's like in the middle. It seems like it's the middle of the night because everyone there except for the person on watch is sleeping. So they all go to bed except for John because he doesn't need to because of the Nanites. And so he's reading and he's trying to figure out what's going on, but he gets frustrated and is not able to figure things out. And so he decides to go to sleep.
I thought it was funny how, what was it, Sefawynn or something? Like Sefawynn was just super tired, and she's like slumped on her horse, and you know, just the classic signs of being tired. And John is almost kind of like, that's weird. He's like, I read about the lack of sleep zombified people, but I thought it was interesting because apparently he's had these sleep nanites long enough where his instincts, I don't know, maybe his memory, if he had a memory back, he'd remember what it was like, but he just finds it interesting to see what people look like when they're tired because he's
maybe he was one of the people that got it when he was a baby, and so it's just always
he very well could be.
Yeah, because I think that because the nanites that are the ones that are what's keeping him awake. And
that would suck. Can you imagine having a baby that could stay awake for 5 days?
I guess if you didn't have to sleep for 5 days too, then I would.
Still, would you want to deal with a wake baby for?
Maybe there's like parental controls. He's like, "Hey, nanites, let my baby sleep."
It's gonna be the opposite. Instead of keeping the baby awake for 5 days, they can be like, "Okay, this is when there's gonna be a nap there, sleeping 8 hours through the night there." And it was just before John went to sleep that I thought it was interesting what he did. Like he was reading through his book again, and not really finding any of the information he wanted, and it kind of just, he says it was like this is a really big book has just like so little information. But what I thought was funny at this part is like he had taken a piece of wood out of the fire I think it must have been burnt out or whatever. He
Yeah,
started chewing on the burnt end. And that was like one of the things he needed to eat to get
carbon.
Carbon, that's what it was. Yeah, he needed to get carbon for his nanites, and I was like, I wasn't expecting that either. Like when he talked about earlier how he needed to eat different food, I thought he actually meant food. I didn't think he was going to be eating burnt wood.
I know, it's funny. His nanites even made it taste like toast.
Yeah.
So like tasted like toast, but had the consistency of chewing on wood, and he's like, even that was a little like weird, but
that would be weird. I've never bitten burnt wood myself. I've touched it and like squished it. It's got that would be a weird texture in your mouth.
No, we gotta do it next time we go camping. Let's bite it so we can know what John went through.
I'm good because I don't have nanites that don't make it taste like toast.
And the funny thing is while he's doing this, there's like an old man on watch just like staring at him like he's a crazy person.
Yeah, I would think they were crazy too. What are you chewing on all this wood for you?
And John's White I don't know if he's messing with him or what, but John's White, the one that's connected to him, starts building stone piles. Yes. And like builds that up, and he's like, oh, what the crap.
And that was kind of one of the reasons why he decided to sleep.
Yeah, he's like, I think I'm hallucinating. So he turned off the settings of the nanites that made him not sleep, and so he decided to sleep. And it's funny when he wakes up, there's a couple funny things that happen. So one, the first thing that happens is he set, I guess that you could set an alarm that just wakes you up. Like you just wake up and the nanites take away any feeling of grogginess. I'm like, that's actually pretty nice.
That'd be amazing. How many mornings have you woken up?
I just hated life.
And yes, exactly. Because like, it's not a Saturday or Sunday morning or something like that where you can just be like, okay, I don't feel like getting up. I'm going to stay asleep. Like, and then like, it's a day you have to work on or something. And then you're just like, oh my gosh. You feel like you need 8 more hours of sleep.
Yeah,
because you're so groggy. That would be so amazing. These nanites are sounding like the type of superpower I would wish for. Those games people play. What kind of superpower would you like? I want nanites.
Yeah, and then the second thing that happens. Oh, I guess I'm skipping ahead. So we're now in chapter 17 is when he wakes up.
Oh, and another thing, he can apparently warm himself, and I don't know if he can cool himself.
Oh yeah, that's really cool. He can like regulate. I think it says he can regulate his temperature. So it seems like
holy flip. Can you imagine? Like, okay, I have the kind of similar problem where like, you know, I have to worry about turning the temperature on my thermostat, like, and always having to adjust it and blah blah blah. But I think people in your situation, where like you're married or something, or you got other people in your house, you have to worry about, like, you wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. Maybe you could keep it at a moderate general kind of like level, but then everyone can just attune their nanites to whatever temperature they personally want. No more it's like, it's so hot, it's so cold. Yeah, there you go. Like, maybe you spend all your money on your nanites, so you just have to turn your heater off and just use your nanites. But holy cow, there is like seriously an unending amount of things you can do with these nanites.
It's like, why wouldn't you? Okay, so on to the funny things of chapter 17. Unless there's anything else you want to say about chapter 16.
No, I'm ready for.
So chapter 17, the first funny thing is he wakes up at 7 a.m., which he thought was going to be really early, but it turns out he was the last one to wake up. And he was like, oh yeah, because this is the medieval. Everyone rises with the dawn and is like instantly has to be productive. So like everyone's doing chores or everyone's telling stories. But the next funny thing that happens is he gets a message and he's like, congratulations, you reached your goal. You had a goal of sleeping 6 hours once a week.
Let's see, you got a full night's sleep.
Get at least 6 hours of sleep every 3 days. And it's like, so far you've accomplished your goal one time this year. And so I'm like, holy crap. So he's only once in the past year has slept 6 hours in a 3 hour time period. So I don't know, maybe it was like the 4th day he slept a lot, or I don't know, but
yeah. I wonder, maybe like he slept 5 hours or something like that.
Yeah. And then he even had a memory of Jen getting mad at him for not sleeping properly. And I was like, why would you though? Like, if you don't really need to. Yeah. I wonder if there's like other side effects that have. Like,
I
even though the nanites keep you awake, like you still kind of have the effects of it. Like it still damages you. So maybe.
I was kind of thinking that it probably would be too hard to fit all this in the book, but there's probably like still a ton of things that could, be like you said, like there's some sort of side effects. Like the nanites can keep you awake, but maybe you're still not quite as sharp, or maybe that just, even though the nanites are taking care or keeping you awake, it still can affect the rest of your body, and maybe it jacks you up.
It's kind of like when you burn pewter in Mistborn, like your body won't necessarily feel what's going on, but it's like still happening. Yeah,
definitely. I also thought it was funny when he woke up that he's like thinking what you kind of just said, like, oh right, I don't know what he called it, the agrarian culture.
Yeah, so
It's
up
like
with the
they're up
dawn.
at the break of the dawn. But what I thought was just funny, just to kind of think of the world that John lives in back in his dimension, because he says, "Gotta milk the chickens" or whatever. So like that was hilarious to think, like, because he doesn't even know what you do as a farmer. Like, you collect the eggs and you milk the cows. You don't milk the chickens. But like, it got me kind of thinking, like, maybe his world is so far advanced and so far into the future that, like,
Nanites,
one
they
of those
have robots
things.
doing everything else. There's no way they
honestly,
don't.
like, it's probably so far gone that they've needed farmers that it's just not even general information to people anymore. They don't even know what animals you milk and which ones you don't. And like,
What if they
all
don't
of
even
that.
have animals anymore? Because it says that
Like
the
a
nanites can make it taste like you're eating anything, and they can cure any toxins from you. And so
Yeah.
it's like you could eat anything you want. Like
Maybe it's kind of like you think of Wall-E, how on the Axiom, the ship they were all on,
yeah.
they had those cups so they could just have any flavor of whatever they had. Like, they did it kind of fast. I didn't see all the things, but you see a little window going by where, like, screen scrolling of all the different flavors you could get of these cups. Maybe it's kind of the same thing where you just get like a bland shake thing,
Then you're
or maybe
nice.
like a thing of tofu like stuff, and
It
then
just has, like, the
your nanites
nutrients
just
you
give you
need.
like, what do you feel like having? Like, oh, I want cereal, so eat this gruel, and it tastes like you're
Just like
eating
Captain
Fruit
Crunch.
Loops. Yeah, or Captain Crunch. So that'd be interesting. Like, there's a ton you could get into about his actual dimension and stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's kind of the stuff that went through my head when you're talking about milking the chicken.
And it's funny, John gets burned by one of the kids in the preserves because Sefawynn's off to the side and she's telling the story of what happened the day before. And one of the girls is like, he doesn't even have a beard. And Sefawynn's like, elves don't have beards. And she's like, but aren't they supposed to be beautiful? So she's pretty much saying John's ugly.
Yeah, you're out. God, you stupid kid.
Oh, and another thing. So when he wakes up, Yazad comes in and sees him, and he's like, "Good news, there were strangers." And it turns out it's a stranger that was there. At first, I thought they were talking about Ulrich, but it wasn't him. It was the redheaded person they were looking for to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when we get another hint that I kind of mentioned earlier, that maybe he wasn't like your normal cop, because there was an old lady there that saw him. And then John has another memory that he used his artistic abilities to be able to do, what did he call it? Like, be able to do, like, be a sketch artist for the police department. Like, you know, if you have like a criminal, you can like describe them and they'll draw them. And so he like used that to do stuff. Oh, we also find out that this bear person, he was a Walish king, and he can only be killed. He's still alive, even though he was in like the grandfather's times, like a few generations. And he can only be slain by his own child, and he has no children, so apparently he's never going to die.
I guess he's just immortal.
And so this old lady that saw this stranger that turns out to be the redheaded man that Ulrich was looking for, I thought it was interesting. She's a traveling hearth keeper, and she sells tinder. So apparently they're so scared of the woods, even though they live right next to a forest, they won't go collect tinder. Someone's got to come and like sell it to them. That's
interesting, because it sounds like this bear guy is almost like Sasquatch or Bigfoot, like where, but like in a real sense, like he's actually real, and he roams these forests, and they're kind of big forests, so you might not see him, but you might. So the fear of that is just great enough that they won't.
It's
go
like his domain or something.
Yeah, I'm sure he sounds like he's just kind of a jerk guy who would definitely like see others, be like, good. Torture it, or something like that. Some crazy thoughts.
Yeah, and her name is Grandmother Thok or Thok, whatever.
I like Thok better. Sounds like thunk.
Yeah.
Thok.
But she describes what this man looked like, and John sketches him. Chapter 18. So we have a little more information. Turns out that totally blank on his name. John's partner in the police force is here also. So it kind of makes you wonder, like, did they come together? Did John come to save or help Ryan?
Yeah, I had the same thoughts, and I'm curious too if he's going through the same thing that John is. It's like,
Probably.
is he lost his memory and is just kind of doing his best to figure out what's going on, or did he survive whatever happened, or is he the one who wrote on that message like, these augments have been taken away from you, don't try to get them back, Johnny? Like that message he got a few chapters ago in his menu when he tried to activate his head and back augments again.
His head and chest.
Oh, it's the chest.
Yeah.
Does
And
he have
his
back ones?
organs, I guess, too.
Oh,
I think his back one works, but
oh, okay.
yeah, I don't think we talked about that, actually. That's a good point to bring up. So John tries, like you were saying, I guess he keeps hitting enter, and like try to do it, and then it says,
Yeah. Oh, this is another one of the reasons why he slept. He wanted to sleep because he was trying to see if he was hallucinating, and he wanted to see if he could like reset his nanites.
yeah.
But then he found out like
Mhm.
he's not hallucinating because that little pile of rocks kept coming back, and apparently like the white got mad and like glued them all together. So
Oh yeah, because he kept kicking him over. It's like every time I built up, he would kick him over, build up, kick him over, build up, kick him over, and eventually he stacked the things, stacked it in like an impossible shape where they're like on their edges stacked in a straight line.
Yeah.
He knocks that over, and finally when they're leaving to go outside to talk to Grandmother Thok or whatever her name is, the tower's rebuilt as a pyramid. I mean, and he goes to kick it. And he stubs his toe because they're glued together with sap.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it was.
And then Sefawynn was like, "Have you been mocking your white?" And he's like, "No." He's like, "I'm just giving him stuff to do. Just kick it over." And even
They
when
like to stack things. I was looking to get stacks.
yeah, and I also forgot, even when they're walking out, there's a bunch of things laid out, like with offerings for the preserved white to work on. It's like things for building rugs and baskets and shoes. Like are all kind of laid out with offerings to get help with it, and John kind of casually is like, "Want to give that a try?" And then he goes to talk to Grandmother. So yeah, so we get that information. And then he's like, "Why is Ryan here?" Trying to figure out what's going on. We get a little more memories. So Ryan, Jen, and John were apparently 3 friends, and then Jen and John kind of got together from that.
That was.
But he
one of
also
the
gets the feeling that him and Ryan aren't on the best terms, like something happened.
Yeah, they're probably not. It definitely felt like they weren't. Like John and Ryan's relationship is better than like John and Ulrich's.
Well, yeah,
But
it seems like they had like a fight.
yeah, it seems like they had like some sort of falling out.
Yeah.
Like they had a fight on the job, or maybe like Ryan had a thing for Jen too, but then John ended up with Jen, so he got all bitter and jealous and stuff, and kind of they fell apart. That's my suspicion.
And they find out that Ryan is in the same place that Sefawynn's brother is going to be at. And so they decide, and John says that he's also an elf and that he's a mighty warrior, and among his people they got to go help him. And they're like, "Oh, they can help us. They can help us defeat Ulrich." Essentially, and he's like, "Yeah." And then we also find out a lot about Sefawynn's past. I think we'll get there in a little bit, but we find out first that Sefawynn doesn't really like. I guess they call him the Whaled Sig, or the Reeve, isn't his favorite person. And they're like, "Yeah, I know he's kind of weird and he doesn't like him," but she doesn't want to talk to him like at all. She's like, I don't want to involve him at all.
Yeah, she's like pushing pretty hard to avoid this guy.
And apparently he's really devoted to Woden, which they think is weird because Woden doesn't want people to doesn't care if people worship him, so it's weird to worship him. And apparently he needed strength at some point, so he nailed himself to a tree.
Yeah.
Which gave him strength in the battle, but made it so he couldn't use his right hand anymore.
Yeah, it was a sacrifice he made of himself to get Woden's favor.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, definitely is really weird. But I guess it worked, at least in their eyes, because he did something that made himself suffer.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he can't use his hand very well or at all. I can't remember exactly what it said.
And we find out also Ryan had been through there 2 days ago, and Ulrich and Quinn, 2 bad guys, had been there yesterday. So they're a day behind the bad guys, 2 days behind Ryan.
Yes.
So it seems like they're chasing the bad guys or chasing Ryan.
And another kind of feeling that I guess kind of just keeps adding on. John was just looking at the sketch he had done with Ryan and was like, Ryan would be annoyed at me if he knew I was here.
Yeah.
So it definitely sounds like, I'm just repeating myself, but it just sounds like if Ryan saw him, he probably would just be like, "Oh, why are you here?" Or maybe he'd like give him a nice right-handed hook, but like not enough. He's not angry enough or whatever at John to like kill him or anything.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what happens when they meet up.
Yeah, to see if it's just John that has these memory issues, or if it's Ryan too, or maybe Ryan.
Oh, this is why we didn't talk about this yet, but this is where it also kind of mentions where he tries to get his augments activated in his head and chest.
Oh, okay. I was wondering
how we had missed over that, but we didn't. We were just jumping ahead and getting ourselves.
So it said the plate's forcibly disabled by external command. You weren't getting them back, Johnny. Stop trying.
Yes. So I just want to know who.
Yeah.
It could be anyone.
My theory is that Ulrich got this dimension, and Ryan wanted to follow, and John was like, I'll go with you. And he's like, no, you've done enough, and Jen's dead. And so he like turns off John's augments in an attempt to get him to stay, and then he leaves, but John follows anyway.
That's a pretty good theory, I think. But I want to know if Ryan is just his partner, how did he have the password to lock?
I don't know.
Maybe he shared it in confidence one time, and now that Ryan's all, he decided to use it to shut his stuff down.
Use it against him. Maybe that's possible. I don't even know.
Or maybe something crazy like Ulrich has it, or maybe he's not allowed to be here, so it's his chief or his captain, whoever is over him and Ryan are just like, you shouldn't be there, so turn it off.
We also find out that John had always wanted to be like Ryan, so I guess he had kind of looked up to him.
Yeah.
Maybe like a mentor type thing. Now we get to learn some interesting information and background on Sefawynn. So after all this, where they come up with the plan first, where they don't want to get detected going into the city, so Yazad offers to help by allowing them to carry in baskets of fruit to the city, and no one will notice them because he does it so often. They'll just think it's every day, and so won't really pay attention to them.
Yeah, classic.
But then we get some revelations, and Sefawynn just starts by saying, our boasts don't do anything. All the Scops know it, and they used to work, and the Hordeman Scalds make their work, so it's possible that ours used to work as well. But it basically comes out that she's not, I don't know if I want to say a fraud, but she does what she thinks that John is doing, where he's just kind of going town to town and pulling cons and the like. And she calls it a grifter, I guess. But that's what she does, because the boasts don't actually work. So she said that there'll be issues where she'll do a loosening, but then the bad spirit will come back, or they'll do something and someone will die, or
right. And is that where they kind of talk about the city that's all destroyed?
Yeah. So
nearby?
there was that town that was right by that preserve that Sefawynn did a boast there, and then the bear came and took it, even though she had done that. So, and she's like, people are starting to realize it. She says that they don't work. And
so I'm wondering if this is a super recent thing. Like maybe the last couple of months or something like that, or maybe a year or two.
Yeah, because it seems like if it never worked, then people would be like, okay, it doesn't work. But since they're related,
that's kind of what I'm still trying to figure out, is if it once worked and now it's just kind of fading for some reason. Maybe it's the same reason why the runes aren't working like they used to. And
then they kind of, John and Sefawynn kind of bond over that, because they kind of have a moment of truth and vulnerability with each other. That's what he says. And they kind of starts a trust between them. And she's pretty much like, thanks for not judging me. And he's like, okay.
Yeah, I like what he says, because he's like, well, you say I'm a grifter too, so how could I judge you?
I'm more and more convinced that John's just like an idiot. I don't know what it is, because she says, every grifter I've known is a judgmental heirs. Spelled A-E-R-S, like heirs.
Maybe that's their word for arse.
Yeah, that's kind of what my thoughts were. But then he's like, there it is again. They call people ears as an insult. 2 stars, better than calling someone a nose, I think. So he interprets it as like they're saying their ears. And he's like, why is that an insult, you freaking weirdo? Like, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, honestly.
Another funny thing is, too, she's like, you're going to convince they start talking about their plan. He's like, are you going to convince the whale sig that you're a lizard, aren't you? And he's like, wizard. And she's like, oh.
They both do it. It's kind of funny. And they kind of have like a little moment, kind of like you were saying, like where they get a little flirty, which I thought was kind of funny.
Oh, yeah. They kind of go back and forth. They're like kind of razzing on each other and going back and forth, kind of like doing those light insults you do that are kind of jokes. It's funny because he says, "Wait, was that flirting? Were we flirting?"
Yeah, that's
And
the
she
thing
just
that I
rolls-
thought.
And she just rolls her eyes. And then walks away. Oh, and so on the way back, they pass the offerings that we talked about earlier, where he asked his wife, he was like, "You give it a shot," and and it did. So there are 20 mats made, a mound of butter the size of a small child, but the shoes have been unraveled to their component pieces. Like even the laces have been stripped down to bits of fibers. So just like a crazy amount of work, and everyone's like, "Wow." Because they're like, apparently that's really powerful for a white to be able to do that much, and like obviously like a blink of an eye. And they say that the white that they have can do like one thing at a time, and it takes a couple days to do something. So
And Sefawynn is super confused about like how did you get such a powerful white?
yeah, she's like, and bound not to a place but to a person. You make no sense.
Yeah, I love how he said you make no sense. She's like, I know. Try being me. 0 stars.
And it's funny because she's like, "What is 0?"
Yeah. Which was hilarious. She's like, what was that the part you were focused on? Well, like, that's the first time he's like said a rating out loud too.
Yeah.
It's just funny to see the reaction. I'd be like, what the heck are you doing, man? 0 stars.
Yeah, she's like, "What is 0? That doesn't make any sense."
Yes.
But then she's like, "Come on, let's go talk to Yazette."
Yes. So
they make some plans.
They've kind of got an idea of what they want to do to get her brother back, but now they got to go and make the actual detailed plans and such. So next week we'll get into what happens on their heist.
Yes, to get in and talk to the Earl and see if they can work against Ulrich. Maybe we'll meet Ryan. Maybe there'll be like a small confrontation there. But what was your favorite part in these chapters?
My favorite part was the fact that he almost drowned.
I know,
with
5 feet of water.
Freaking nanites. Not only, okay, I can understand someone drowning in 5 feet of water if there's like a special circumstance, they're knocked out or something. But like, how the flip did he almost drown when he has those nanites and he can breathe under, or at least hold his breath for 5 hours? Like what? So I just thought it was kind
I guess
of.
if you still inhale the
because like
liquid.
I don't know, you kind of. This is kind of a weird example, but if you ever were like sitting in the ocean where like maybe the water's up to your shoulders, and you see a guy in full scuba gear, he's got the goggles, the tank, he can breathe through it, he's going like that's how ridiculous I see John. Like, how are you drowning right now?
Yeah, seriously. I think my favorite part was just John's realization that even though this is a different dimension that's similar to his, it's definitely not. And he's starting to come to terms with there are whites, there are some sort of magical forces about.
Yes.
He hasn't quite bought off on there being gods, but he is starting to be convinced that there are whites and there's something going on.
Yeah. Must be weird for someone like him coming from a world like his where it's so massively technologically advanced that the idea of magic and deities is probably just completely absurd.
For real.
It's going to be interesting to see how this book ends with. I want to know if like we're going to get a nice solid conclusion, or if it's kind of can have a little loose strings that will kind of just have to come up with our own answers or something. But
we will see, and so will you next
better see.
week
On
Into the Betas.
All right, let's go play Fortnite.
It's over.